Chapter 47, Holes. The sun was up and Stanley's heart was still beating. There were 8 lizards in the hole with him. Each one had exactly 11 yellow spots. The warden had dark circles under her eyes from the lack of sleep and lines across her forehead and face which seemed exaggerated in the stark morning light. Her skin looked blotchy. "Satan," said Zero. Stanley looked at him, unsure if Zero had even spoken or if he'd just imagined it. "Why don't you go see if you can take the suitcase from Zero?" the warden suggested. "Yeah, right," said Mr. Sir. "The lizards obviously aren't hungry," said the warden. "Then you go get it." They waited. "Stanley," said Zero. Sometime later, Stanley saw a tarantula crawl across the dirt not far from the hole. He had never seen a tarantula before, but there was no doubt what it was. He was momentarily fascinated by it, as its big, hairy body moved slowly and steadily along. "Look, a tarantula," said Mr. Sir, also fascinated. "I've never seen one," said the warden, except when Stanley suddenly felt a sharp sting on the side of his neck. The lizard hadn't bitten him, however. It was just merely pushing off. It leapt off Stanley's neck and pounced on the tarantula. The last Stanley saw of it was one hairy leg sticking out of the lizard's mouth. "Not hungry, huh?" said Mr. Sir. Well, Stanley tried to return to the snow, where he was imagining himself in a better place. But it was harder to get there when the sun was up. As the sun rose, the lizards moved lower in the hole, keeping mainly in the shade. They were no longer on his head and shoulders, but they had moved down to his stomach, legs, and feet. He couldn't see any lizards on Zero, but believed there were 2 between Zero's knees, shaded from the sun of the suitcase. "How are you doing?" Stanley asked quietly. He didn't whisper, but his voice was dry and raspy. "My legs are numb," said Zero. "I'm going to try to climb out of the hole," Stanley said. As he tried to pull himself up, using just his arms, he felt a claw dig into his ankle, so he gently eased himself back down. "Is your last name your first name spelled backwards?" Zero asked. Well, Stanley stared at him for a second in amazement. Had he been working on that all night long in his brain? Because his name is Stanley and then Yelnats. So it is spelled backwards. His first name is spelled backwards. He heard the sound of approaching cars. Mr. Sir and the warden heard it as well. "You think it's them?" asked the warden. "It ain't no Girl Scouts selling cookies," said Mr. Sir. He heard the cars come to a stop, and then the doors opened and shut. A little while later, he saw Mr. Podansky and 2 strangers coming across the lake. One was a tall man in a business suit and cowboy hat. The other was a short woman holding a briefcase. The woman had to take 3 steps to every 2 that he was taking because he was real tall. "Stanley Yelnats," she called, moving out ahead of the others. "I suggest you don't come any closer," said Mr. Sir. "You can't stop me." She snapped, then took a second glance at him, wearing pajama pants and nothing else. "We'll get you out of there, Stanley," she said. "Don't worry." And she appeared to be Hispanic, with straight black hair and dark eyes. She spoke with a little bit of a Mexican accent. "What in tarnation?" the tall man exclaimed as he came up behind her. She turned on him. "I'm telling you right now, if any harm comes to him, we will be filing charges not only against Miss Walker and Camp Green Lake, but the entire state of Texas as well. Child abuse, false imprisonment, torture." The man was more than a head taller than she was and was able to look directly over her as he spoke to the warden. "How long have they been in there?" "All night, as you can see by the way they were dressed. They snuck into my cabin while I was asleep and stole my suitcase. I chased after them and they ran out here and fell right into the lizard's nest. I don't know what they were thinking." "That's not true," Stanley said. "Stanley, as your attorney, I advise you to not say anything," said the woman, "until you and I have had the chance to talk in private." Stanley wondered why the warden lied about the suitcase. He wondered who it legally belonged to. That was one thing he wanted to ask his lawyer, if she really was a lawyer. "It's a miracle they're still alive," said the tall man. Yes, it is, the warden agreed, with just a trace of disappointment in her voice. And they better come out of this alive, Stanley's lawyer warned. This wouldn't have happened if you released him to me yesterday. It wouldn't have happened if he wasn't a thief, said the warden. I told him he would be set free today, and guess what he decided to do? Take my valuables with him. He's been delirious for the last week. Why didn't you release him when she came to you yesterday? The tall man asked. She didn't have the proper papers, said the warden. I had a court order. It was not legal, the warden said. It was signed by the judge who sentenced him. I needed it from the attorney general, said the warden. How do I know it's legitimate? The boys in my custody have proven themselves dangerous to society. Am I supposed to just turn them over loose anytime someone hands me a piece of paper? Yes, said the woman, if it's a court order. Stanley has been hospitalized for the last few days, the warden explained. He's been suffering from hallucinations and delirium, ranting and raving. He was in no condition to leave. The fact that he was trying to steal from me on the day before this release proves it. Stanley tried to climb out of the hole using mostly his arms so as not to disturb the lizards too much. As he pulled himself upwards, the lizards moved down, keeping out of the sun's direct rays. He swung his legs up and over, and the last of the lizards hopped off. Thank goodness, exclaimed the warden. She started toward him, then stopped. A lizard crawled out of his pocket and down his leg. Stanley was overcome by a rush of dizziness and almost fell over. He steadied himself, then reached down, took hold of Zero's arm, and helped him slowly to his feet. Zero still held the suitcase. The lizards, which had been hiding under it, scurried quickly into the hole. Stanley and Zero staggered away. The warden rushed to them. She hugged Zero. Thank goodness you're alive, she said as she tried to take the suitcase from him. So she's acting like she cares, but she don't. He jerked it free. It belongs to Stanley, he said. Don't cause any more trouble, the warden warned. You stole it from my cabin, and you've been caught red-handed. If I press charges, Stanley might have to return to prison. Now I'm willing to, in view of the circumstances, it's got his name on it, said Zero. Stanley's lawyer pushed past the tall man, to have a look. See, Zero showed her, Stanley Yelnats. Well, Stanley looked up too. There in big letters was Stanley Yelnats. That's why Zero was saying that, is he actually saw those words on the suitcase while he was down there, and that's what he was trying to say. The tall man looked over the heads of the others at the name on the suitcase. You say he stole it from your cabin? The warden stared at it in disbelief. She couldn't even say it. So chapter 48 tomorrow.